Hi, everyone. This is Rob Swint, one of the moderators today. Thank you for joining our webinar. We're going to wait a few minutes to give people who are coming from other meetings the opportunity to jump in. So some of us will be muted, but just hang with us until more people join. And again, you'll hear this message a few more times. We're going to get started here in a moment. We're just going to give everyone the opportunity to join as people are coming off meetings. So hang with us. We'll get started in a few minutes. Well, hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is Rob Swint. I'm one of the moderators today for our webinar called How to Change Learning Reinforcement for Remote Workers. The focus of our webinar today is going to be around motivating learners, reinforcing learning, and mentoring and coaching through change. We're excited here to have two great panelists, Celine Mullins from Adaptas Training and Gunce Malan-Rush, Senior Instructional Designer for Mindmarker and a faculty member at University of Tampa. Celine, do you mind just saying hello so everyone knows you're on?
Hi, everybody.
And Gunce?
Hi, everyone.
And I'm going to thanks you two. And I'll do introductions, more formal introductions here in a moment. I'm joined here by J.R. Otamendi from Mindmarker. He's one of our more senior instructional designers who works every day in instructional design for some of our largest clients. He's going to help moderate on the Q&A section. So as you're submitting questions today, you're going to be seeing responses from J.R. And he's also going to be jumping in to ask questions of our panel. So J.R., you want to say hello?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah. JR has a much better radio voice, so hopefully we'll hear more of him. So today, before we start, quick details is all participants are going to be muted today. If you have a question for the panelist, we definitely want to get to your question. So use the Q&A section. JR is going to be lining up all the questions and then presenting them to the panelists as we go. So if at any point something you'd like to know more about something, put it in the chat window. Not in the chat window, I'm sorry, in the Q&A section. If you have questions for the host, like you're having problems or something very specific, use the chat window. If you have Zoom's problems, we aren't going to be able to help you at all. So go to support.zoom or call their number, but rest assured this webinar will be recorded and available for viewing after we close here. I'll be posting this webinar replay as well as the Comcast webinar from 2 weeks ago on our website following this webinar. So our agenda today is we're going to start with an audience poll because we like to get the audience very involved in this webinar today. We're going to ask your opinion on certain topics and then have our speakers be able to respond or comment on what you're feeling today with your different learning challenges and different topics with corporate learning. Then I'm going to do a speaker introductions as well as sponsor introductions so you know a little bit more about Mindmarker and Adaptas, and we'll go straight into the panelist topics and moderator Q&A. So first, let's do a poll question. This always just takes a minute for me to pull the poll up. So give me one moment, group. All right, so here's our first poll today. Over the last 6 months, what changes have you seen in your learning ecosystem over the last 6 months? Has it changed the way you manage? Has it changed the way you retain information? Has it changed your motivation to learn or work? When I say change the way you manage, I think of it in terms of, has it changed the way you manage your employees? Or the way you manage learning? Feel free to specify in the Q&A. Please take a moment to respond to the poll. And hey, JR, real quick, can you see the poll? Because it looks like we are seeing, you know what's happening, everyone? We are seeing poll results. Let me change this real quick. I'm going to resubmit this poll. We were practicing with the poll right beforehand. And so, give me one more.
I can try this out if you want me to.
Yeah.
There you
Sure,
go.
that'd be great. I've got it right here, JR. It should be relaunching right now.
There we go.
Okay. All right, let's try this again, everyone. If you can respond to the poll. Now we start seeing responses coming in. I'm going to give us about a minute or about 20 more seconds to respond to this to try to get as many people involved as possible. Okay.
Yeah,
It looks like the
answers. Yeah.
It looks like the responses have started to stabilize. I'm going to end. Oh, we're getting a few more. All right, I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results, and we're going to come back to these results a little later. So the winner is what's changed the most in the last 6 months with learning is it's changed the way you manage. And when I'm interested in that, and when we start the conversation, we're going to start with that. In these next few minutes, if you have any more details about how you've changed the way you manage, weigh in right now in the Q&A. Share that with JR because I'd love to be able to present that to the panelists so they can hear about what things you see changing. Same as well as with how it's changing your motivation to learn work. If you have any specific anecdotes or specific observations, share those in the Q&A because we'd love to bring those up in the discussion. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Great. So let's go on to our panelists. So we're excited about our speakers today. We're bringing to you first Dr. Celine Mullins. Dr. Mullins is the founder and CEO of Adaptas. She's a PhD in psychology, and she's also the author of a book series called Maximizing Brain Potential. Her first book is available on the Amazon store today, Our Learning Brain, How to Engage Minds for Learning and Habit Change. And you'll see the second one is just about to be published called Developing Learning Habits, the 7 Steps to Successful Change. She's made appearances on TV, radio, and national press. And what I find most interesting, Celine, about your background is that you're a master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. And I think what's interesting, what you'll bring to this conversation is anytime we can attach learning to real functional aspects of the brain, it's a great exercise because often we forget the cause behind a lot of the learning challenges we have, and the fact that you can bring that perspective from a real neuroscience background is really interesting. Did I miss anything, Celine, on your background? I didn't. Okay, all right. Gunce Malan-Rush is a senior instructional designer at Mindmarker. She works with some of the largest companies in the world to design their learning reinforcement programs on behalf of Mindmarker. PhD in curriculum instruction design. She is on the faculty at the University of Tampa teaching a course called Theories of Learning and Cognition for Instruction. Gunce has thousands of e-learning modules that she's created over a lifetime, as well as Dr. Mullins. So between the two of them, they bring an enormous perspective on how to promote learning, how to affect behavior change, and the challenges behind it. Gunce, thank you. And I know, Gunce, you have a small child at home, so I appreciate you taking the time today to spend with us on this webinar. Did I miss anything in your background, Gunce?
Nope, that was perfect. Thank you.
Great. And just real quickly about Mindmarker, we're a sponsor, is just one slide. Why are we interested in this discussion and why are we hosting this? we're a messaging platform to help learning retention. We work with corporate learning and development teams to help them help their learners retain learning and apply it in the workplace. And the way we do this is we break up learning into small messages that help reinforce what people have learned. We do this with short 30 to 90-second messages sent at very defined intervals designed to maximize retention and application of learning. And these can be a push, simple sending snippets of content and reminders, to more advanced such pull interactions such as quizzes, tasks, assessments, and ways of gauging whether learners are interacting and understanding the content that you're giving them. And we do this throughout the learning journey, from before learning happens to prepare learners for learning, to reinforcing after learning has been completed, measuring whether that learning has been successful, and then the ability to adapt these messages so you can reach those learners that might either be struggling with the content or need more challenge to explore new areas of content that the others aren't ready to move past. The end result is our customers see 4 times greater learning retention and behavior change. This is why we're so interested in this conversation, because we make learning more effective, and the fact that we can sit here and talk with Celine and Gunce about some of the challenges today and how this type of reinforcement and these type of techniques to increase retention can help learners. We're really excited about it, and that's why we want to bring experts like these two to the table to have this conversation. So Celine, I wonder if you would just use a few seconds to tell us about Adaptas before we go on to the panel discussion.
Sure, Rob, and thank you again for inviting me to be part of this event. Adaptas has been running for 13 years. You will probably notice, some of you who are not near where I am, a lot of you are in the States. I'm in Ireland, little old Ireland, just across the water. We've been working here for the last 13 years and also internationally. And we have been just immersed in learning of all sorts of different kinds with regard to soft skills, including one-to-one workshops, which obviously have all become virtual. And we also, in the last couple of years, have also added to our list immersive virtual reality training. And in 2018, we won an award with one of our clients called Immersive Sales Star, which was really immersing somebody in the body of the role that they are about to start doing. So we're always trying to just make learning as practical and as real as possible. Thanks, Rob.
That's great. Thanks, Celine. So with that, we're going to go straight to the panel discussion. And how I'm going to start it is I'm going to pull back the poll results to, let me pull it up, to remind us on how the audience responded. So the most popular result was that people, and over the last 6 months, the learning has changed quite a bit. It's changed people in the way they manage. Celine, I wonder if we could start with you. What have you seen in the way people have changed the way they manage their employees and they're managing learning during these last 6 months? What are some of the characteristics of all this work from home and this remote workforce have changed how companies are training employees?
Yeah, it's interesting actually that it's been a big topic of conversation, especially recently, because research has been coming out showing that about 30% of managers haven't actually checked in with their employees to ask them, how are you doing? So during the strangest period of time during most of our lifetimes, they're not necessarily checking in. And but what I'm really happy to see here is that 50% of our audience today have said that you have changed the way you manage, which I'm going to assume the positive here, which means that hopefully you are reaching out more to people, and that possibly you're having more conversations about how are you doing, rather than just the business of the day. So that's great to hear. And I think that, like for me with all of this, when I heard that stat just last week about 30% of managers not reaching out, I just thought, wow, we've got potentially a real problem here around maintaining culture and maintaining engagement and maintaining motivation. And I'm very, very interested in this area because of all the work that I've done over a decade now with organizations. You know, we've got to consider the relationship between change, which we've all been going through, managing further change, which we're all going to continue going through, and psychological safety and self-protection. And I say self-protection because a lot of us go into a self-protection mode, often unconsciously. So if you're working as part of an organization or even in a local community or in an educational setting, it's really important to think about self-protection and loss. Okay, so that's my funny accent, LOSS, loss. So it doesn't matter if you're an individual attempting to learn a new skill or are part of a business that has been asked to do something different. Which most people have been asked to do something different over the past 6+ months. So anytime we're been asked to do something different or reduce or change a behavior, we're experiencing some sort of loss, either consciously or unconsciously. And so, I mean, if you've ever been involved with making a change in a team or organization, or a change has been thrown upon you, you'll know that there are all sorts of models, change models that can be followed. And all of these models refer to engaging people in a solution or a plan as early as possible towards co-creation and buy-in. Why is this? So in any organizational environment where more than one person is involved, in the propensity for people to feel unclear about their roles or unclear about where their team is headed or where the organization is headed, or misunderstand why certain changes are taking place, wherever that's happening, there's always a propensity for an individual to go into self-protection. And the reason I'm mentioning this and really focusing this with regard to any of you as managers is that you've got to consider self-protection, because if we perceive anything, even unconsciously, as being negative, or we feel fearful, or we're unclear about what's coming next, and I don't know about all of you, but I'm going to assume that all of us have been going through waves of uncertainty over and over again over the last few months. When this is happening, our body overproduces adrenaline and cortisol. So it increases our cortisol and overproduces adrenaline. And adrenaline is perfect for getting us motivated. But once it goes above a certain level, and that'll be a different level for all of us, then we become stressed. And when we become stressed, our motivation and our creativity and our ability to engage with whatever the change is going to ignite the fear circuits of the brain. So, you know, there's been a lot of research done on this area by Richard Boyatzis, who some of you may have heard about, very well known in the area of leadership and change and neuroscience. And so the role of the manager is becoming more and more important with regard to helping people handle change. And also, change is embedding learning for the long term. Because, as I say, loss, you know, the gain is always in the distance. So you've got to sometimes really hold people's hands, hold them, take them through, help them to keep that growth mindset going forward. And also within your team, helping the culture of growth mindset to keep growing and keep developing, so that, you know, it's okay for people to make mistakes, and it's okay for people to give and receive feedback, and it's okay to hold each other accountable. Accountability is one of those words that a lot of people don't like, but as a manager, it is your role to hold each other accountable in a supportive way, focusing on growth mindset. So I don't know if that answers the part of it anyway.
It's Gunce.
Yeah, that was perfect,
Yeah.
Celine. Yes, I actually want to add a couple best practices just to put a couple, I guess, in addition to what Celine mentioned. So as we went through the past 6 months, there are a lot of things that we went through as an individual, as a worker, as an employee, as a father, as a mother, that affected all of our daily work life. So a couple best practices that has emerged within the past 6 months is, one of them, as Celine mentioned, is actually encouraging frequent communication with your employees. And unfortunately, now that everybody is being, well, some companies are coming back to their workplaces, but majority of the companies are now considering going remotely, 100% moving forward. So doing these frequent communications, either weekly, even daily through a video call, helps a lot with the employee's morale as a manager. So you can actually use internal communication platforms. While emails are a very good way of communicating with employees, but unfortunately, they lack that instant communication piece where you can actually check on somebody, walk into somebody's office and say, hey, what did you do with this report? Now, everybody's working from home. If you were to send an email, sometimes it takes 30 minutes to get a response. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes, depending on what that person is doing at that moment, right? And using one of those internal communication platforms, instant messaging systems will actually eliminate some of these communication gaps. Some of the other things Celine mentioned, making time for small talk is becoming even more important now because everybody is so isolated. And there are actually, within the past 3 months, I should say, there are new companies that are emerging that are creating virtual team building activities. So there are real instructional design companies who adds the gamification to the part of becoming a team, which is also very important. So for those of you who never heard before, please just do a simple Google search to see what activities you can bring in. There is a website, it's called Zoom Games. So it's literally designed for Zoom meetings, the different games you can build into your weekly meetings. Another thing that's becoming really, really important is recognizing your employees' efforts. So normally, if somebody would do a great job in a report or like in a weekly team meeting, they would mention or bring up an issue that nobody else thought before. When everybody else is in the room, you can say, yes, that's a great idea. But now that everybody's separated, sending those weekly emails to recap what everybody else is working on or like what you actually accomplished for that week becomes even more important now, so that you can actually let other people know, even though everybody is working themselves in their own work environment, you can bring them in by communicating in a detailed message on a weekly basis. And the last thing I would mention is this is becoming also very common within the past 4 months now, is actually establishing clear goals and expectations. And managers are recording themselves in a video to, instead of sending an email and say, hey, here's the next project, here's the thing you're going to work on, they're actually using these interesting backgrounds like spaceships or anything through their whatever the internal communication system they're using and sending these information to their employees. I think as an employee, I would love to have my own manager send me a funny video of my next task. So maybe consider it for one of your next upcoming project too, just to show whoever is working under you that you care about what they do and you actually want to bring fun back into the workplace. That's it. That's all I have so far.
Just thinking of something, just to jump in there quickly, there was a research paper presented at a conference recently, which is now showing that potentially if you are working with, because you know the use of Zoom and Teams and GoToWebinar, all these different things are being used now for people to have meetings, and a lot of the time it's Zoom call after Microsoft Teams call after call. It's, you know, and that is absolutely exhausting for us. So a lot of us are getting to the end of the day feeling absolutely exhausted. So this conference paper that was presented, it's not been published as a piece of research yet, but it's something to think about, is showing that actually video, speaking through video is actually because our brain, the way it's built, so much of our brain is working on the visual processing, which is actually taking away from then our brain's full capacity to problem solve, to you know, really maybe do some of the thinking that you need to do. So if you are problem solving, mind mapping, things like that with your colleagues, with those you are managing, maybe think about turning the camera off a little bit more. Of course, turn it on to say hi, because you've got, you know, people want to see the whites of your eyes. So I would say don't go the other way completely, because then I have experienced a lot of organizations where they're not turning their cameras on at all. You've got to see if you can find a balance between the two.
You know, Celine and Gunce, I'm going to use this opportunity to do another poll question for the audience.
Before you move on, Rob, can we go ahead?
Well,
we do have some shout out to the audience. Thank you so much, guys, for getting all engaged. I see some familiar names out there from partners and clients. So hello, everyone. And they're actually actively engaged, and they're asking some really good questions. The number one, Gunce, what was the name of the website you mentioned for the games for Zoom that sparked a lot of interest?
Oh, we can't hear you, Gunce. There you go.
It was Zoom Games.
I'm going to go ahead and post the link in the chat box so everybody can grab it.
Excellent. Thank you, Gunce. Appreciate that. All right. And we did have a couple of great responses related to the question that was asked. One of them, I'm assuming, is in leadership. And then the question was, what's changed in your learning ecosystem over the last 6 months? And then much more frequent one-on-ones with their team. So that interaction that we're talking with the leadership and management, they actually have done a lot more of that, due to the circumstances. And a lot of them are actually more at the personal level. So checking in, making sure they're okay as an individual. So awesome for the leaders out there reaching out, making sure that people are okay. And another great answer we have in here was how do you, how the ecosystems change. And this is when, even Mindmarker comes into play, is creating more interactive and online virtual training, which is, absolutely a shift that we've seen. Even here at Mindmarker, us in the design team, we've seen a lot of spark of interest of existing clients, and a lot of clients coming to us to use our platform to introduce some of those, concepts outside of reinforcing, also making it more, appealing to a virtual audience by incorporating, like Gunce said, videos and voice notes and things like that, that are, really handy. Play button, listen to something, and you go on the go. So anyway, I got those questions on here on the Q&A. So thank you everyone for participating.
I might just jump in on that, Jay, or just to make a comment as well about the fact that people are saying, they're making it more interactive. So anything that you can do to make your learning and training more experiential, anything you can do to help people get into their body on the learning, the better. Okay, so because so much of the learning that we do and thinking that we're doing, like I was saying earlier, if we go into any sort of feeling of, oh, if I have to make this change, even unconsciously, I'm going to be losing something, we deactivate the creative centers of the brain. So the brain is only one area involved in our learning and our doing. Our body has such a huge impact, and you'll hear people talking about the gut-brain connection and everything. There's messages coming up from our stomach all the time to our brain. For every 9 messages the brain sends down, 1 comes right back up. So, and this is going on every minute of the day. So anything that you can do to help people connect in with their body and how they're feeling, how they're feeling. So anything that you can make it experiential, even online, people are making it much more interactive by getting people to use different types of approaches, different platforms. So anything where you can get people involved rather than them just sitting still. And I love some of what Mindmarker is doing with some of the tasks that are being pushed out, at least with everything, even a video where people are giving examples of how this relates to them, that helps us connect in with the experience of being, the embodiment of being human.
So, thank you, Celine, and everyone. I didn't mean to do it in the middle of your conversations, Celine, but I put up.
It's okay, Rob.
Yeah, I'm going to do 2 polls. I heard you getting people get people active, get them doing things. Well, I'll give them a poll.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have 2 polls here for the audience. The first one is about learning challenges. The next one is going to be about manager's role. So I'm going to do those, and I'm going to do those both in a row, and then we'll share them one at a time with the audience. Take a moment to read these through, and what are the biggest obstacles to making employee learning effective today, as opposed to a year ago? You'll see some of the things that Celine and Gunce have already hit on about motivation and so forth. Take a second, and I'm about to close the poll. I'll give us about 10 more seconds.
Yeah, and feel free to type in the suggestions on the Q&A or things that you guys do, so we can bring it up for discussion.
Okay, I am going to end this poll, and if you didn't get a chance to answer, just put it in the Q&A. And before I share the results, I'm going to do one more poll, which is a little simpler. It's about the manager's role. And this question is, what role do your managers play in employee learning programs? There's many different roles. Sometimes they're just passive participant. Sometimes they get involved with instructors, and sometimes they're coaching and reinforcing learning after the completion. But I've seen such a wide range of organizations role for the manager, but I think the common theme is always there, that it is so important for learning to be effective. So let's see what the audience says in how they're engaging their managers in the learning. And if you reply other, I would love it if you could type into the Q&A some of the things you're doing with managers, so we can share that with the audience and share with our panelists. All right, a few more seconds, and I am going to end the poll. So let's go to the first one, okay, which is employee learning challenges today. Okay, what are the biggest obstacles? Let me share these results. So the number one, lack of an opportunity to practice new behavior, which I can relate to. When you are remote, as a remote employee, there's so many fewer opportunities to hear your peers parrot what you learned in training, to learn from others, and also to practice in a friendly manner. Celine, have you seen that? Do you have any suggestions on how, in this new era, how
Yeah.
managers, how instructors can help promote practicing of these new behaviors to create new habits with this remote workforce?
You know, I mean, the thing is, I've had this conversation 3 times in the last 48 hours. And obviously I'm only coming from a place of, say, soft skills and behavioral change. I mean, when it comes to learning how to use new computer programs and more of the hard skills, I can't really talk to that. But with the soft skills, all of our soft skills are around, resilience building, communication, emotional intelligence, all those types of things that we can absolutely practice on a day-to-day basis. We don't need to be in an office to practice those things. And the conversations I've been having over the last 48 hours are where somebody who's in a learning development or a HR function is saying, okay, we want you to do some leadership training, or we want one of your team to do some presentation skills training, whatever, but they're not getting the opportunity right now to present. And I'm saying, look, we are always communicating, whether it's just on Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whether it's with somebody who delivers something to our front door, whether it's on the phone to a friend, whether it's sending an email. Every single skill we're learning around the soft skills area, we can absolutely apply on a day-to-day basis. And we've got to find opportunities to do that. And so for me, coming back to the manager role, is that, don't assume that your team and your learners are going to do that or even think about doing that themselves. I mean, I know myself, when I was attempting to become better at becoming better at having difficult conversations, I started practicing with, when I was getting on the bus, I would practice with the bus driver if I thought he was driving unsafely. If I was going to the gym, and I didn't think the gym instructor was paying enough attention to our class, I would have my difficult conversation with him. It's just trying these things out all the time. And, because a big issue obviously for everyone in learning development is measuring the impact. So if you can at least have it that people have to come back with, hey, this is where I applied this, and this is where I tried it out, and this is where it worked, and this is where it didn't work, and this is where I need to practice this more. There's no excuse for us not being able to practice what we're learning in soft skills learning and training anyway. I can't speak to the hard skills.
Yep. And Gunce, I saw you nodding while she was saying that last part. What's your perspective?
Yes, so for soft skills, you're absolutely right. For hard skills, there are a couple of things we can do, especially in a training environment. The first thing that I want to remind everybody is see the training see it as a process rather than an event, so that when the training is delivered in the form of an event without any follow-up, you run into risk of trapping the learners in the forgetting curve. And one way to avoid this problem is using spaced repetitions, especially for the hard skills. So by using spaced repetitions, what I mean is you need to create opportunities for learners to hear the same information several times during that training event, so that even after the course, even after the training and whatever the specific situations that they have to use that particular skill, you actually give the opportunity to your learner to emphasize the importance of that information. One of the other techniques that we use for the hard skills is what we call creating social interaction. And we need to create that increased social interaction before and after the training, meaning you have to socialize that idea of the training is coming, right? Give opportunity for your employees to talk to each other. And then right after the training, especially at this time now that everybody is remote, you have to bring back that peer learning, but not as an official training environment, as an opportunity for them to actually refer back to the information, talk to each other, just talk about their experience, give them an opportunity to talk to each other about what they understood was correct, especially for the hard skills. Another thing you can do is keeping the learning sessions short. So unfortunately, we're all guilty of creating these half day, full day trainings. We do know that putting somebody through an 8-hour training is not going to help them learn, especially for hard skills. Maybe soft skills, yes, they can practice it at home, but the minute the employees are done working, they're not going to practice how to use a specific software in their own time. So creating those explicit link between what they learn and how they can use it in their real life, especially for hard skills, will help them. And if you can also create opportunities for your employees to use that newly learned information as soon as possible, it will also help them with the forgetting curve, because what it's going to provide is it's going to give them opportunity to take that information to the next level, and they're going to make it their own. It won't be the 100% what you try to teach them, but they will learn the piece that they care the most from that particular training. Thank you.
And can I just to jump in, and I am not going to be popular saying this at all, but my experience is, and I'm not here to be popular, I'm here to do a good job. So my experience is that a lot of people who are working in learning and development, it's kind of like, if we think about, you know, the way they say doctors never take their own advice. You know, you meet a lot of very unhealthy doctors, and you hear about doctors who are having heart attacks or living on chips and Coca-Cola. But, you know, it's just that they don't take their own advice. And I think that this happens with a lot of people in learning development as well. It's like, take your own advice. I was speaking at Learning 2019 in Florida I guess it's nearly this time last year. And there was about 200 people in the workshop, and at least 3/4 of them came up to me after my workshop or in the following days after that to say, you know what, I didn't know this information. I didn't know what is required to help people embed change long term. I didn't realize how the brain works, and why, and the forgetting curve that Gunce just mentioned, and the fact that we need so much repetition. And without repetition, the learning does not embed. So I'll leave this with you that, you know, just go pick up a general text in psychology. And many of you will have read it before. Go reread about memory. And that's why, you know, again, it's repetition, repetition, repetition. Back to Rob's message and Jara's message earlier on.
Well, you can see in the answers how that repetition is likely absent today, Celine, and that you see what are these, the top three are lack of opportunity to practice, employees forgetting what they learned, and distractions, right? And when you have so many distractions, it is hard to prioritize that type of repetition on your own. Well, I am going to focus on this one that 20% of the people said, which is that managers don't support training, and that I'm going to pull up the responses to the other poll in the manager's role in learning. And what role, 21% just said that managers don't support their training. And so, okay, well, how are managers being involved? You know, most people said they're going through training just like their employees as a passive participant, right? You know, Celine, this is, I mean, to start with you, this is how I've always seen my managers go through training in the past. They are very seldom an active participant. What do you see, and what is the proper role for a manager to make sure that employees are learning this and taking away the skills they need?
Well, I mean, it really is a lot of what we've been talking about already. I don't know if you've come across a piece of research that was done by, I think it was by Gallup a few years ago, where they found that only 1 in 10 managers actually has the natural skills to be a good manager. And to be a good manager means actually helping people to learn, because in all of our roles, our performance, our engagement, everything that we do, our learning has an impact, a back and forth impact. And even, you know, there's a lot of research. There was actually research done by LinkedIn, I think it was last year, where they found that learning impacts massively on people's performance and happiness at work. So, you know, I think some of the mistakes that have been made, just to come back to what you're saying there, Rob, is that a lot of, say, senior managers don't necessarily go through the same training as people throughout the organization are. And if you're you know, a lot of people get to a certain level and they think, oh, they're over there, they're not doing it, or down there, they're not doing it the way we want them to do it. But often the people who are saying they're not doing it the way we want them to do it aren't doing it either. And they've got to be able to role model, you know, what it is to be a learner, what it is to put it into practice, what it is to repeat it, what it is to be vulnerable, to say, hey, I've been working on this thing, but I'm not, you know, I'm getting stuck with it and I need some help and I need you to hold me accountable to this. So, you know, and also the big thing where I'm seeing a big difference as well is when organizations train their managers as coaches, which I know a lot more organizations are doing now, but when they train them as coaches, then the managers tend to get much better, obviously, at asking questions, at listening, and at supporting people through their growth. So for me, that's the big step at the moment. I'm seeing more and more of it, but manager as coach, really important. Because, you know, none of the golf players, none of the baseball players, all these people that we look up to, they didn't get there from just doing it once or twice, and they didn't get there without some support and coaching.
Yep. Hey, Gunce, so if someone came up to you and said, hey, if someone comes to you before kicking off a training module and they say, hey, what do we do with our managers? How do you approach that?
Couple things. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is the engagement, because it's very, very important, especially when it comes to training environment, because we're expecting these people to actually learn something and do something with that information that they just learned. And to create that engagement, maybe creating and setting some small incremental goals for them to understand at what part of the training, what they're expected to do, and how are they going to start using that information immediately, so that they can actually recall back and forth to understand, okay, this is what I learned, here's a new method of doing it, and this is how I'm gonna do it. That will help a lot. Another thing is maybe helping the managers understand why this training is important for their team will also help the manager explain it to their employees. So information always flows from top to bottom, especially when it comes to doing something with that information. And starting with why is important, it's always a good reason for adults to start learning, to get rid of some of those barriers that we all have. I know it better than you. You don't have to teach me how to do my job. That's one of the most common phrases that I learned, especially if the hiring is happening from outside for these big companies. They struggle with this new person coming to the job, and the person who's under that person needs to teach that person how to do their job. So creating some reasoning behind the importance of the training, but also creating a schedule for your employees to show them, a visual to show them, hey, the first day of the training, here's what you're going to learn, here's what you can do with this information. That's the biggest thing. Another thing that I would say is maybe creating some sort of a communicative culture where you can actually provide immediate feedback and support to whoever is struggling at whatever the stage they're struggling throughout the training. As I said, if everybody can start seeing the training as a process rather than an event, I think everybody's perspective will change, and it will help everybody else to see that they're all in the same team. They're all in it together, and just to see what part or what role they can take to help them go through this entire process.
And I'll just jump in really quickly on the why. The why is, it's the magic. It's if you're not helping people to think about their why, you know, because I would say why is important for 3 reasons. Why, think about when you first want to make a change or you recognize a change is needed. Initially you might feel quite motivated to do it. So your why connects you in with your motivation, why you want to do it. Your why then, because usually when we start trying to do something different, as what we've been talking about, the discipline decreases. Like the discipline, you know, the motivation only lasts so long, and then we need discipline to step in. But discipline's so boring for so many of us. So the why is important for motivation, it's important for discipline. And then thirdly, it's important for the long-term change, right? Because without motivation, you're never going to get discipline. Without discipline, you're never going to get long-term change.
JR,
right.
I saw
Yes.
a bunch of Q&A was flying in.
Absolutely, yeah. The crowd's going wild with all the questions and whatnot. So yes, I want to go ahead and intervene here for a little bit. But yeah, we do have pertaining to this particular question and the prior one as well. But this one, we have a couple of comments here saying that regarding their management or their managers, say they mostly play a passive role because they're trying to coach and stimulate, you know, their participants to put it, you know, what was learned into practice. And they get managers involved with small micro learning moments to tell them that their team is trained or what they're trained on, and how to follow up and coach. To say it's not a guarantee, but it actually helps. So I like to see that model, which is really, really good. And then going back to the previous question, a lot of people share some of the challenges they're having with, you know, with these times, and then the, you know, the lack of being able to apply or to practice what was learned, you know, which has always been in learning and development the biggest problem, right? Checkbox, you're done, you're good, compliance, you're out. We want them to be able to apply what they've learned, right? Which is, you know, that reinforcement. They say in sales area, one of the biggest obstacles is the opportunity to have on-the-job training with salespeople during the meeting with the customers, for example. And I wanted to touch on that because one of our largest clients, as a matter of fact, is a previous webinar that we had with Charter Communications and Matt.
Comcast.
Comcast, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. Comcast, then they actually implemented a very, very, very strong program that touched in this without having to be physically present. They actually recorded some of these scenarios via videos or phone calls, and they still be able to use like the Mindmarker platform to apply and share some of that experience, you know. So on nowadays with the problem with COVID and being out there physically present is a really good opportunity to promote something like that. So I wanted to bring that up because it's a great example of the things you can do with technology nowadays to promote the application of learning and specifically using our tool.
And I just to expand on that further, Celine and Gunce, what I thought was interesting about our webinar last week is Matt, in talking to me, explained how when they went through sales training for all, they were trying to change habits, Celine. They were trying to change the habit that they had spent a long time putting in place with their sales reps, and to put new habits in place for their to follow their new sales methodology. And they put their managers through the same training, and then just assumed that they would be experts afterwards to be able to coach, like JR was saying, to be able to coach and reinforce it. And the first time they did it, it didn't work. And they saw just a huge, that it wasn't nearly as effective as they wanted to be because they didn't treat them differently. And that they had to create, I think, JR, what you were alluding to is that entire different stream for the managers. And they used Mindmarker to do it. They used basically their own reinforcement stream to give them tips on how to coach it, on some of the real fundamentals that they need to coach, and then which one of their employees, based on the data, JR, you were talking about, which of their employees they should be following up on and reinforcing, and even going so far as giving them techniques to do it. And I thought that was really innovative, because even I, as a manager in the past, I was always just placed in the training so I could see what people, like the person on the Q&A said, to see what the employees are going through. But I was never really given much training on how I could coach them and reinforce it afterwards.
And somebody
I thought
just
it was
put in here the buddy system also sometimes works. You know, obviously right now more in a virtual setting, but having a group of people that are more experienced as you come in, you know, they've been around a little more. That helps you as well have some of that OJT that you can't really have in that setting to help you coach you and promote you, because what better source than the person who's actually doing it? You know, we respect leadership, we respect everyone, but the person who's doing the job that you're about to do on a daily basis, that's some of the best training you can get. Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in on that as well. So I would also recommend using action learning sets where you have a group of 4 to 6, not 46 learners move together through a program and hold each other accountable to their learning and be able to chat through, hey, I tried this out, and, you know, be coached as a set. So if you look up peer coaching or action learning sets, that can be really powerful, as well as all the other things that we're talking about.
We're getting close to the end, but I'm going to put one more poll up because there's a topic that you talked about, that all of you talked about quite a bit, which was motivation. Okay, and Gunce, you were going into it quite a bit, and it's something that I've thought is often absent. And here, this is the question: hey, how are you motivating employees to learn today? Do you simply just say you're going through training? It's a requirement. You have to do it. Are you doing an actual campaign to try to? I think Gunce, you were speaking about it. Do you explain how this is going to improve their life and their job ahead of time? Because I think that's something that I always felt was missing as a participant training, is really getting excited for it coming up. And then the last one is the rewards for attending and applying the learning. I'm going to give a few more. I'm going to give about 10 more seconds of response. And one thing I think, Gunce, you mentioned, which I thought I probably should have been here, is the things of gamification and the aspects of ranking people and giving them, and basically recognizing them when they do well. I think, Celine, you were talking about that. Recognizing people when they do well is an option I wish I had had up here.
Yeah, and I just to, you know, because I've been finishing off a second book on this topic, I have been really, and trying to bring it back to the simple things, but actually it is the most simple things in life. I mean, telling somebody why it's going to be useful for them is one thing. Asking them why they believe it's going to be useful for them, asking them to get clarity on, you know, what difference it will make in their role or in their life. A lot of the times it just comes back to using the most simple things to actually motivate people and to motivate change. So come back to, like, what specifically do they want to do? Why do they want to do it? Who's going to support them in it? What are the obstacles that are going to get in the way? And there's lots of other steps that they can take, but sometimes it's just coming back to simple stuff, not overcomplication anything.
I want to give a shout out to the panelists because apparently a phrase that was said, quoted, see training as a process, not an event. It just was great. So anyway, just shout out to to you ladies, because it definitely makes a difference.
Well, I thought this response was interesting, that people are, that some of your recommendations people are already executing on, doing campaigns to make people really understand the benefit to how this is going to make their job or their life better as a motivating technique to prepare their brain for training. And I thought that was interesting, Celine, because I know that you speak a lot in some of your writing about how rigid the brain is and how some of the techniques you have to use to make it more pliable.
You kind of have to fool your brain, because your brain's always trying to keep you safe. So you've got to keep it simple and then jump over some of the stories we tell ourselves that block us.
Yeah. And Gunce, is there anything that you would elaborate on from a motivation standpoint? And if techniques or anything that you've seen at clients that they've done that's innovative, that has really helped boost motivation for people when they come into training? Oh, and we just lost you. She really felt passionate about it. we just lost Gunce.
I can jump in real quick there, Rob.
Yeah,
if you want
sure.
About a question is actually for Celine. One of our attendees said that you stated that the role of manager is becoming very important to handling change. How should a manager be trained to handle this, and how would you equip him properly to do so?
For me, it's coming back to the manager as coach, number one. And number two is helping them to understand how change occurs, how the brain and body works around change. So again, there's a huge amount of information out there. Indeed, I've been writing books on it to try and make it simple, but there's tons of information out there that needs to be shared with people who are in not only learning and development and HR and change management, etc., but also people who are in manager roles. Help them to understand how the brain and body works, how the memory works, how the brain and body is built for self-protection, and to help people share the techniques with them to help them manage their people to overcome these blocks.
That's great. One of the attendees said that motivation makes people show that they're successful in applying skills on the job. And again, this is a huge role for the manager. But if you want to tap into Rob until Gunce gets back and connected, here at Mindmarker, what we've seen is a spike on a lot of interest once again to making programs more engagement, right? People are starting to use the application of Mindmarker more of a blended approach, not necessarily just reinforcement. And one of the most successful things that we can show them, that we've been sharing with them as feedback and basically, best practices, will be using that motivation at the beginning of the program when you are to deliver the training event. Use the Mindmarker application to say, hey, this is part of your learning event, and basically incorporating the videos. That's been huge. Having the facilitator, having the CEO of the company, that important person they can recognize, that it will spark motivations because they're investing in them, and they really, really can relate to that, and we have the same person show up throughout the learning journey at the beginning of the program. Hey, welcome. Thank you for participating. We're doing this for you. A midway point, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you overwhelmed? Are we giving you too much? And then again, you put it on the participant side to gather that feedback, and that makes them connect that this is something that the company is doing for them, that they're investing in the learner, not necessarily something else to do or a checkbox. So wanted to share that with you guys.
That's a great idea.
Very similar to what Yves has said in the Q&A, making people show they're successful in applying the skills on the job. So what you're talking about there is helping people to show that they are applying them on the job.
Exactly.
Well, we're at Gunce. We didn't skip a beat when you left. We assumed you were very insulted by the question, and so we moved on. But we are at the end of our hour. I want to take just a moment to thank you, Gunce and Celine. This is the start of what we hope to be an ongoing webinar series where we get experts like the two of you to come in on these topics, and we'll continue to refine it. And I appreciate you jumping in this very kind of Q&A format that is hard to prepare for.
Thank you for having us, and I'm more than welcome to continue the conversation on LinkedIn or other ways if anyone wants to.
Thank you, Gunce.
Thank you, everyone.
I want to point everyone out. You can buy Celine's book on the Amazon store, or she also has a link on her website to alternate ways of purchasing it. And look for her book to be coming out this month, Celine.
Yeah, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Thank
and
you.
We're also going to have, if you want to forward this on, or you want to hear that conversation we had with Matt McShay from Comcast Business last week, we'll have it posted on our website in the coming days. So I just want to thank everyone in the audience for being so engaged, and look for more of this in the future from Mindmarker. And until our next one, have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.